Nothing has raised many questions in Nigeria in recent time like the ENDSARS movement. It started as an organic movement led by the youth population of Nigeria and was made popular by social media. It gained traction in Nigeria and abroad. Everyone heard about it in every part of Nigeria and in every country of the world. It started peacefully and went on for days. Lekki Toll Gate was the epicenter of the movement. Everything was going on fine. It was just a peaceful protest. But one night, a night that cannot be forgotten, the unthinkable occurred. The movement disappeared in the way and manner that leaves many citizens thinking till today. The end of the movement is still an enigma. It remains inexplicable. It remains a mystery. There are several questions, and the questions keep multiplying by the day. On Back in History, we take you back in time to the events that characterized the ENDSARS movement of Nigeria. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. SARS was an arm of the Nigerian Police Force. It was an acronym which meant Special Anti-Robbery Squad. This squad was specially formed by the police authorities to combat the recurring cases of armed robbery in the country. The squad was in all police commands in the 36 states of the Federation and at the Federal Capital Territory in Abuja. The squad started so well and kept the criminals on their toes, to the admiration of many citizens. But later on, the squad left its core mandate in most instances and went after innocent citizens who may have been involved in purely civil disputes with their fellows. In other instances, citizens were stopped on the roads, searched and tortured. In other instances, members of the SARS group incarcerated their victims unlawfully and inflicted torture on them. Several persons died in the process, and some became permanently incapacitated. The excesses of SARS was too much and fast becoming unbearable. SARS was brutal, and the fear of SARS was real. When the excesses got to the head, Nigerian citizens in Lagos took to the streets and called for an end to SARS brutality. Here lies the origin of the hashtag ENDSARS. It turned into a movement and was described as the ENDSARS movement. On Saturday, 3rd October 2020, a video surfaced on social media, and in the video, a SARS police officer was shown shooting a young Nigerian in front of West Town Hotel Ikeja, Lagos State, Nigeria. It was alleged that the police officer took away the young man's vehicle, a Lexus SUV, after the shooting. The video trended non-stop, and the trending video caused public outcry on social media, especially on Twitter, with the ENDSARS hashtag trending across the globe. This was the beginning of the ENDSARS movement in the year 2020. At this time, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was President Muhammadu Buhari. While the dust of the shooting of Sunday, 3rd October 2020 was yet to settle, another report surfaced on Monday, 5 October 2020 of SARS officers killing a 20-year-old upcoming musician named Daniel Chibuike, popularly called Slick, in his neighborhood. Slick was said to be sitting in front of a hotel with a friend when the SARS officers approached them, prompting them to flee. According to eyewitnesses, the SARS men pursued Slick and his friend, shouting, "Thief, thief," before shooting Slick as they ran through a supermarket. Slick did not survive the shooting. He died in the process. His friend was arrested. Lagosians did not take this lightly, and by this time, Twitter was almost filled to the brim with hashtag ENDSARS. On Thursday, the 8th day of October 2020, a nationwide protest on ENDSARS was carried out by Lagosians. The Lekki Toll Gate was a point of convergence. The protest then spread to other cities and to other states of the Federation. The protests were led predominantly by young Nigerian citizens. It was a well-organized protest, and some was sustained for days. People slept and woke up at the arena of the protest. Food and water were served by public-spirited youth in their bid to sustain the protest. Among the Lagos State ENDSARS protesters were celebrities, some of whom were Fowls, Ron Town, Don Jazzy, Idris Abdul Karim, Sega Ling, and a host of others, including several comedians and media personalities. In Abuja, David Adeleke, known popularly as Davido, joined a group of protesters to register his support for the agitations of the ENDSARS protesters. Videos also surfaced of personnel of the Nigerian police force disrupting the protest in some cities, throwing tear gas, using water cannons, and shooting at unarmed, peaceful protesters. In Ogbomoso in Oyo State, one Jimoh Isiaq was killed. This further infuriated the protesters, who became more determined to continue with the protest. By Wednesday 14th October 2020, the ENDSARS protests were still ongoing, with young people in different parts of Nigeria intensifying their calls for reforms, decency, humanity, and accountability in police operations in Nigeria. The demands eventually expanded to include a call for good governance and accountability from Nigerian leaders. The protest was also held in a number of cities abroad. On Sunday 11th October 2020, the protesters made a list of 5 demands to be met by the government of Nigeria. The first demand was for the immediate release of all protesters arrested during the protest, as well as justice and compensation for all who died through police brutality in Nigeria. They also demanded that an independent body be set up within 10 days to investigate and prosecute all reports of police brutality. The protesters also asked for the psychological evaluation and retraining of SARS operatives before they are deployed to any other police units. Lastly, the protesters requested for increase in the salaries and improvement on the welfare of officers and men of the Nigerian police. The first response to this was the announcement by the hierarchy of the Nigerian police force that it was dissolving the SARS units. The Inspector General of Police also banned the Federal SARS, Special Tactical Squad, Intelligence Response Team, Anti-Cultism Squad, and other tactical units from mounting roadblocks, checkpoints, stop and search, and other routine and patrols. The protesters were pressured to leave the streets and end the protest, but the protest continued unabated. It was a movement, and it was difficult to stop by fiat. Several government functionaries joined voices to call for an end to the protest. Governor Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State met the protesters at the Lekki Toll Gate. He took photographs with them and gave them the assurances of his government. Still, the protest did not stop. Before his meeting with protesters, the Deputy Governor Femi Hamzat had already met them and addressed them and acknowledged that the police officers have no right to trample on the fundamental human rights of citizens. The Lagos State House of Assembly also intervened and held an emergency session where recommendations were made to government. Since the olive branch approach did not work, government then applied some drastic measures against the protesters. On 19th October 2020, President Muhammadu Buhari reacted to the continuation of the movement by warning young Nigerians of anarchists that were already attempting to hijack the protest and stated that the federal government, in his words, quote, would not tolerate anarchy in the country, end of quote. On Tuesday, 20th October 2020, the Central Bank of Nigeria and its then governor, Godwin Emefiele, obtained an ex parte motion from the Federal High Court in Lagos to freeze the accounts of notable participants in the ENDSARS protest. The order of the court showed that 20 protesters banking with Access Bank, Fidelity Bank of Nigeria, First Bank, Guaranty Trust Bank, United Bank for Africa, and Zenith Bank had all their accounts linked to them frozen indefinitely. This was a surprise to many. On Wednesday, 14th October 2020, protesters in Lagos were attacked with cutlasses, sticks, and charms. In Abuja, protesters were attacked by persons carrying cutlasses at Bega roundabout. Cars were destroyed and some of the protesters were injured. On Friday, 16th October 2020, thousands of protesters gathered at the Admiralty Way Plaza Toll Gate, Lekki, and at the Lagos State Government Secretariat at Lausa, Ikeja, to hold a candlelight session for the various victims of SARS/police killings. At this time, the harassment of protesters by security agencies had reached a condemnable dimension. On 20th October 2020, social media was on fire. DJ Switch had alerted the world that soldiers had invaded the venue of the protest in Lagos to open fire on innocent protesters. She relayed clips on her Twitter handle live to the utter surprise of viewers across Nigeria and across the globe. DJ Switch trended on the internet, showing how live rounds of ammunition were being shot at innocent protesters who crouched on the ground, holding hands together and singing the Nigerian national anthem. In a swift reaction, the Nigerian army denied the allegation and stated that no shooting of live bullets whatsoever was carried on against the protesters. Lai Mohammed, the then Minister of Communication, also stated that the allegation of mass shooting by the army is false. DJ Switch became a most wanted person and had to escape for her life. The story of the shooting continued to pop up in public discussions, and there was serious resentment across the country. The president then addressed the nation and called for calm. There was no calm. The atmosphere remained charged. There were condemnation everywhere within and outside Nigeria. CNN called the night of 20th October 2020 a massacre. This too was rejected by the government of Nigeria with a threat to sue the international media outfits. The news of the shooting of innocent protesters at the Lekki Toll Gate gave rise to a violent reaction in many parts of Lagos. Curfew was imposed, but same was largely ignored by angry protesters. About 30 BRT buses belonging to Lagos State government were burnt to ashes. Public and private buildings were touched in the process. The attack on public utilities went beyond Lagos and was seen in other states of the Federation. There was tension, there was pandemonium, and there was a serious crackdown by security forces. There was anger across the nation, and something needed to be done as quickly as possible. In response, the National Economic Council, the NEC, announced that each state and the Federal Capital Territory should establish a judicial panel of inquiry to investigate cases of police brutality against protesters and compensate the victims. The panels were constituted in the states and petitions were received. Lagos was a special case, and everyone wanted to know the intentions of government, and in particular, the composition of the panel to hear the mountain of complaints that had become seriously compounded by the reported shooting of protesters at the toll gate. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu at a press briefing in Lagos announced the composition of a 7-man panel of inquiry and restitution to look into the ENDSARS complaints in Lagos. The governor announced that the panel will be chaired by retired Justice Doris Okuwobi. Other members were Mr. Ebun Adegoruwa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, representing the civil society; Taiwo Lakano, a retired Deputy Inspector General of Police; Ms. Patience Udo, representing the civil society; Mr. Segun Owosanya, human rights activist; Mrs. Olutoyin Odusanya, Director, Citizens Mediation Center, as well as a representative member of the youth-led protest and a representative of the Human Rights Commission. Unlike the other states of the Federation, the panel in Lagos had a dual assignment. Firstly, to investigate human rights abuses by SARS, and secondly, to investigate the reported massacre of innocent protesters at the Lekki Toll Gate by mass shooting. The panel went on to work, and on conclusion of its assignment, it submitted a report to the Lagos State Government. The report of the panel had 309 pages. It was titled Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry on Restitution for Victims of SARS-Related Abuses and Other Matters. It was signed by Honorable Justice Doris and all the members of the panel. At page 283 of the report, the panel noted thus, quote, "The panel finds that although the army gave copious evidence of general commotion, violence and mayhem in other locations in Lagos State other than Lekki Toll Gate, there is no justification behind the deployment of its soldiers and officers to Lekki Toll Gate in particular when there was no violence reported there." The panel continued, "The deployment of the army to Lekki Toll Gate on 20th October 2020 in the absence of any reported violence was totally unwarranted." End of quote. The panel also noted as follows at page 289 of the report, quote, "From available evidence, it is without doubt that the military did not just use blank ammunition at Lekki Toll Gate. The eyewitnesses' account shows very clearly that live ammunition was used by the military, who were initially the only people who carried arms to the protest ground on the day of the incident. The medical evidence on the nature of the injuries sustained by the protesters and cases of death were result of the deployment of live ammunition as confirmed by the forensic experts Sentinel Forensic Limited and Oxygen Consulting UK Limited." End of quote. At page 294 of the report, the panel noted thus, quote, "The presence of protesters at the Lekki Toll Gate did not threaten the territorial integrity of Nigeria and could not be considered as a civil insurrection to warrant the intervention of the Nigerian army." End of quote. At page 298 of the report, the panel held, quote, "From the totality of evidence before it, the panel finds that some sets of cameras stationed at the Lekki Toll Gate were removed by members of staff of the LCC operators of the toll gate on October 2020. These cameras could have assisted the panel in its investigation into the incident that occurred in the night of the 20th day of October 2020. End of quote. The panel then held at page 294 of the report that the shooting of, quote, "unarmed, helpless and unresisting protesters while sitting on the floor and waving their Nigerian flags and singing the national anthem can be equated to a massacre." End of quote. Recommendations were then made by the panel to the government. The full text of the report can be found and downloaded at www.lagosstatemoj.org. This is the official website of the Ministry of Justice, Lagos State, Nigeria. Shortly before the presentation of the report, some excerpts of the report leaked to the public, and there was outrage across the country. When the report was officially presented to the governor, a small committee was set up to review the report and submit a white paper to government. In the end, Lagos State government vehemently rejected the report and described it as being full of inconsistencies. The then Federal Minister of Information Alhaji Lai Mohammed, in a press conference held in Abuja, also described the report as, quote, riddled with discrepancies, innuendos, inconsistencies, speculations, and errors, end of quote. He added that, quote, its conclusions were not supported by evidence, end of quote. This was how the story of the Lekki Toll Gate protest ended. The controversy surrounding the entire narrative continued, but later on, the story was no more heard again in Nigeria until a memo of the Lagos State government dated July 19, 2023 leaked to the public space. The memo, which was addressed to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health, Lagos State, was headed, quote, letter of no objection, mass burial for the 103-year 2020 ENDSARS victims, end of quote. The letter conveyed the approval of the government of Lagos for the award of contract to Mr. Stoss Funerals Limited in the sum of 61,285,000 for, quote, the mass burial of 103-year 2020 ENDSARS victims. This letter was signed by the Director General of the Lagos State Public Procurement Agency. This letter brought once again to the fore the memory of the events that occurred at the Lekki Toll Gate in Lagos State, Nigeria. It brought back several questions upon questions on the lips of the citizens of the country and on the lips of international observers. The Lagos State government reacted swiftly that the bodies in issue were picked from several parts of Lagos and not from Lekki Toll Gate. The reaction from government further compounded the Lekki Toll Gate story, leaving Nigerian citizens with more questions than answers. Indeed, the Lekki Toll Gate story remains one of the deepest stories in the contemporary history of Nigeria. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video.